Hi, this is Group B's presentation on knowledge management, organizational performance, and human performance technology. Our group members are Justin Morris, Lori Maher, and Justin Gast. The concept of knowledge management, or KM, is a little difficult to understand at first. Wikipedia defines knowledge management as something that comprises a range of strategies and practices used in an organization to identify, create, represent, distribute, and enable adoptions of insights and experiences. Such insights and experiences comprise knowledge, either embodied in individuals or embedded in organizations as processes or practices. But what is knowledge? Knowledge is defined by Haney as something that is composed of contextualized information, cognition, and skills. It is the ability to productively use information. This concept of knowledge management is fairly new in the human performance technology realm. It was never used in the early 1970s, and in the future it may not be needed or used. However, the need to manage effective and purposeful communication of what individuals in an organization knows will remain paramount, even though the methods might change. Knowledge management is the process of controlling or directing the creation, identification, organization, storage, dissemination, and maintenance of knowledge in order to support strategic goals. It is important to note that knowledge isn't simply what we hold in our heads, rather it is also contextualized information that can be stored in databases and documents. Knowledge exists on both an individual and collective level. Teams, departments, divisions, and an entire organization are all examples of where knowledge can exist on a collective level. One of the reasons that knowledge management is so important is the fact that knowledge is currently believed to add more value to an organization than land, labor, or capital. Haney explains that knowledge is different from sample data or information because it is more organized and meaningful to specific situations and can be acted on easily. It's more useful than basic data or information because it is contextual. The chart shown is from page 620 in the handbook. This chart outlines how data is least useful when it is decontextualized, while knowledge is data with additional information and context to explain it becomes the most useful to the organization. Many companies have begun to use systems and software to try and manage the knowledge in their organization. Examples of companies that use knowledge management are Chrysler, Harley-Davidson, IBM, Nissan, Sears, and the U.S. Army and Navy. For example, Sears customer service teams use a software called Zendesk to manage all the different information and topics people call their help desk for. It's difficult to estimate the costs of implementing a KM system because how can you decide how much of your company's new information technology system or personal time is dedicated to just KM? The highest estimates are around 8 to 10% of annual revenues for consulting companies. However, often the high costs are a result of companies who choose to go with an information technology system to manage the knowledge in their organization. There can be benefits to this approach, but buying an expensive program is not a guarantee. KM has an impressive record of documented successes. One book, the Knowledge Management Practices book, outlined the results from over 100 organizations worldwide who implemented some kind of KM. The results often look as if they're a result from other actions, but all related to KM. Examples of results are Sinmade had their productivity double when they decided to involve workers in the decision-making process. Or, Chappella Steel has seen an absentee rate 1/4 of the industry average since they change their pay structure to reward accumulation of skills as well as performance. These might seem like changes in incentives or other areas, but are all related to knowledge management, because KM is based in the open communication of ideas, observations, and creativity. So by talking with organizations' greatest resource, their teams and their knowledge, these companies have been able to tap into the needed items to allow performance to increase. Implementing KM usually produces incremental improvements in organizational processes. To justify the need of KM to executives, and HP technologists may have to look at the problems in three categories: hoarding knowledge, reinventing the wheel, and making poor or slow decisions. Example of these issues might look like the following. A senior claims processor retires and then immediately starts working for the same company as a consultant because nobody knows how to do the job as well as he does. Or two training departments in the same company and in the same building each support a different client group. Independently design almost identical templates. Or a business opportunity is lost to a competitor because the proposal writers could not find the documentation they needed even though it existed on a company database. These problems don't necessarily go away once a KM system is in place, but having a system in place begins the expectation that the organization shares what they know. Best practices are implemented, results are measured, and lessons learned are documented on previous projects. Successes and failures are captured. KM is linked to communities of practice, organizational learning, and intellectual capital. These are terms for the processes, relationships, and concepts that are typical day-to-day activities on the job. A team member learns something new about the software the organization uses and immediately shares that information with their team. This knowledge sharing begins to then resemble the idea of a community of practice. A community of practice is a group with a single common interest, some shared understanding and assumptions, and collective knowledge of strategic importance to the members. This is a group that learns from each other. They invent, discover, and learn more than they would alone. They are the conduit between individual knowledge and organizational knowledge. Organizational learning is a process of changing processes, routines, and procedures based on knowledge contributed by a member of community in order to improve themselves. This is a prime contributor to knowledge management. Organizational knowledge is what knowledge is owned by the company, such as patents, as well as rented by the organization, such as the knowledge of the individuals working there. Individual capital is the sum of the organization's intangible and non-physical assets, such as an intellect of an individual, which creates something which in turn then is owned by the organization because they then patent it. Change is consistent in organizations, and knowledge follows a process of creation through obsolescence. Let's go through the steps briefly. 1. The cycle starts with acquiring knowledge. This can be through creation, learning, and purchasing it. 2. Identification of the information is deciding what the important information from the information acquired. 3. Organization and codifying knowledge is the process of organization and converting the knowledge to a format that can be stored, maintained, and accessed. 4. Storing usually is to a server or database that can be accessed by users and helps prevent loss, sabotage, or espionage. This can also include people's minds, databases, and documents. 5. Distribution can be through push or pull processes. Push processes are processes that the information is automatically pushed to the individual without their request for it, such as emails, mandatory training, etc. Pull processes are when the information is available to the person when they want to get it, such as in a database they can access if they want, or a brown bag luncheon which they can attend if they choose to. 6. Use is simply applying the information to an individual's work. And 7, maintaining the knowledge is updating information, looking at quantitative and qualitative aspects of how often and how well the information is accessed and used. The author notes that a KM system should be explicitly connected to other organizational programs and process and needs to be closely aligned with the needs of the stakeholders such as management, information technology, HR, and especially the end users. She then outlines 7 critical success factors, or CSFs. All need to be taken into account, but not all need to be controlled in KM. This depends on the organization that's being worked with. They are people, culture, process, structure, leadership, technology, and measurement. People refers to personnel and their skills, cognition, and productivity, their motivation to learn, and if they are hoarding knowledge, and if they believe knowledge is power in the organization. Culture refers to values, behaviors, and beliefs of an organization and its members. Trust can affect the culture of an organization and the degree to which it's okay to make mistakes. It's most difficult factor to work with because it's the most resistant to change. Process refers to both the pre-existing work processes and the specific KM processes being implemented. This deals with how, when, why, where that people share information, such as post-project write-ups. Structure refers to organizational alignment and designated resources for KM in the organization, such as a knowledge manager or other employees who have an effect on the KM. Leadership is financial leadership and champions of the effort. Those leading the effort, leaders should overtly participate in KM activities such as using the database or sending an email containing the observations of what went well and what did not in a project. Technology refers to communication and information hardware and software. This can include video conferencing tools, voicemail, telephone, since these support KM. But remember that technology itself doesn't produce effective KM. It's dependent on the people to implement the processes and information. Measurement is the last CSF. This is deciding on the metrics to track such as knowledge, workers' productivity, and expertise. All these factors need to be taken into account when establishing a system of KM, but each endeavor will be unique to the organization. Establishing a KM system is important and can follow a system similar to the ADDIE process. But remember, it always needs to be maintained and evaluated once in place. A SWOT analysis can be used as a starting point to assess the need. The process is like that of a front-end analysis process with interviews, surveys, observations, etc. being used to gather information. Work with the HR department and key stakeholders to determine the needs of the company's knowledge management systems. Design needs to build on existing processes, structures, relationships, etc. New roles, responsibilities, performance standards, and incentives may have to be designed. Involve the key stakeholders in the development of the KM system. Have workshops to inform and create buy-in. To implement, you may want to implement a small-scale pilot group first to test out the system. Once full deployment is ready, you need to assign permanent KM roles on the staff and advertise and communicate the KM systems. After the system is implemented, just remember that it needs to be maintained throughout the company, processes, culture, and systems to be successful. This has been our presentation on knowledge management, and thank you for your time.